I'm Rebecca Lindquist, and this year I'd like to share with you breakthrough breathing. Breakthrough breathing is a technique I've developed to help non-native speakers add breath to their speech. Now, if you're wondering why that's important, I'll demonstrate breathless speech. This is breathless speech, so I'm talking without using a lot of air. What qualities do you notice when I do breathless speech? Notice that my voice is a little bit softer. It's a little bit harder to hear. It doesn't carry. It's also faster. When I add breath to my speech, it's easier for you as the listener to understand what I'm saying. And many non-native speakers are transferring patterns from their first languages. That may be happening for you. What that means is you can pronounce all the words correctly and still find that you sound different from a native speaker of American English. And if your goal is to acquire an American accent or to speak to an American audience in a way that doesn't cause people to question what you say, ask you to repeat, or have difficulty understanding you, then it's so important to add breath to your speech. Now, I've mentioned this in past videos, but what I haven't done is explicitly shown you how to change your breathing. And I'd like to focus this year, starting 2012, on a new note with the concept of breakthrough breathing. That is allowing breath with speech, which is very different than singing with breath, doing yoga breath, Pilates breath. Almost every art form that uses breath has a different type of breath. Now, that can be useful because if you're a dancer or a singer, you have to breathe. If you're a swimmer or a golfer, everybody has to breathe. The difference is speech requires a certain type of breath. And American speech in particular will sound better if you're using certain breath patterns. And we want, of course, to improve your speech. So let's get started by learning a little bit more about breakthrough breathing. The first step is to look at where the breath is coming from. Now, you could know, and you will notice if you take a mirror, and I recommend, as many of you know, that you use some type of a mirror, either a large one, or many of you are using smaller mirrors just to look at mouth movement. But the larger mirror will be useful for breath because you want to see where you're moving. So I notice if I look at myself in the top portion here, I can notice that my chest is not moving. If the chest is moving up and down and the shoulders are moving, then you will probably be breathing thoracically or clavicularly in the clavicle or in the throat area. Depending on your first language, you can transfer patterns that you may not even be aware of. Breakthrough breathing is about learning to breathe from the diaphragm. So what we're going to do with the mirror now, and you might want to grab a mirror and do this with me, is look at where your breath is coming from. When I speak, I notice that my breath is coming from my diaphragm. The diaphragm is really in the stomach area. It's much lower than you might think. And many people know they should be doing diaphragmatic breathing, which is what we call it, but they may not know how to do it or how to enable it. And this series of videos will speak on that topic. The first step is awareness. As with anything, if you don't know what to look for, you won't know if you're doing it right. So watch that your shoulders and your chest are not moving. Be aware of the lack of movement, and be aware that there's much greater movement in the stomach area. So I'm going to breathe in. Notice I do that quietly before I begin speaking. And whenever I pause, breath is released. Now, those of you that have watched other videos know that it's important to know the length of your sounds. And breath will also enable you to extend or elongate the length. Now, some of you may be familiar with my rubber band technique. We use special promo stretch bands that don't hurt your fingers from overuse. So the idea now is to use this band with a little bit of length on certain sounds, and those sounds get longer with breath. The band is a good indicator of length. It's a nice behavioral reminder. But if you don't have enough breath coming out of your mouth, which you can monitor with your hand, you should feel breath on certain sounds like more than you do on other sounds like buh. Buh has no breath, but breath, the last TH sound has lots of breath. Let's use that word breath as a starting point. First, notice the length. Breath. Now notice the mouse placement with your mirror. Breath. The TH sound, as many of you know, has the teeth at the tongue. But what you may not be aware of is that the tongue, for most non-native speakers, tends to drop in the middle. So check your tongue to make sure there's no middle droppage. If there is, which is likely, you'll need to bring your teeth in contact with your tongue, like so. Think about it. Breath. Now when you move the tongue, you can go in and out. Think of a snake going or s. But the difference between the s and the th is the tongue to teeth action. The s or s sound doesn't require the tongue to touch the teeth. So the upper teeth are in touch with the tongue the entire time, and the tongue is not dipping. It's important not to dip. Now let's watch with a mirror. Breath. Now the important thing here is if you don't have enough breath, you're going to get the word breath, which is a little different. Notice my R change too, because those patterns tend to go together and transfer from other languages. What you want to do instead is breathe from that diaphragm now, filling up with breath and filling up outward. So you're expanding as you breathe in. And as you exhale, you're pulling in. This will also affect your pitch. You'll have much more pitch control with breath. Now for those of you that are accused of talking too fast, that's many of us. So if you have an audience that tells you the speed of your speech is too fast, can happen. It doesn't mean that you need to speak super slowly, as you've seen me discuss in other videos. It does mean you'll need to change your breathing from clavicular, chest, thoracic breathing to diaphragmatic breathing, which is dramatically different and much more enabling. Now let's work with the kinds of sounds that are longer. Some sounds that are longer are vowels. For example, a word like road should not be pronounced rod. Rod is too short. With breath, we can make it much, much longer. Road. Today, however, we're going to talk more about consonants than vowels. Now, all vowels like O, A, every vowel is voiced. What does that mean? Voiced means that if you put your hand to your throat, you'll feel a buzz. O, E. Literally any vowel you say has a buzz. Not every consonant has a buzz. Some are voiceless like th in breath, and some are voiced like th in another. If you put your hand again to your throat, notice the difference. Breath, no vibration. Breathe, another. Now you have vibration. When you have vibration, it's easier to make your voice louder, but it's also easier to say sounds without breath, like this, another. And this sounds very accented. So let's integrate breath with those sounds. I'd like to start with a couple of sample sentences, and we're going to begin by using breath sounds. These are sounds that are voiceless. So let me give you a short sentence like this one. Establish a strong rapport. Now look at those words. Think about them. Establish has two airflow sounds. Establish. Two sounds. S and sh. Establish. That last sound gets very long. If they sound similar to you, as they will for some Vietnamese speakers and some Indian speakers, for example, then make sure that your tongue is behind your teeth for the s, and that your tongue touches your palate or the upper part of your mouth when you say shh. Another important factor is make sure that your palate, the top of your mouth, is moving forward. So important. Most Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, and many Indian speakers are moving the palate backwards. Why does this matter? This matters because if your palate is going backwards, you will not be able to release breath. Let's try that sentence. Moving the palate forward, breathing from the diaphragm. Establish a strong rapport. If you're not getting breath, make sure that you are filling the diaphragm with breath and exhaling. Feel with your hand if you feel breath. And next we'll be working with a tissue technique to monitor that breath and make it stronger. So one last time, let's practice breath with breathing with speech. a little bit of breath, breathing with speech, and now exhaling, palate moves forward. Establish a strong rapport.